Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're going to take an in-depth look at the 50th anniversary Flying V Brimstone burst that Gibson did in 2008. Now, you might be saying, that's a really strange looking Flying V. Super 400 inlays, binding on the headstock. What's with this goofy logo and this whole body shape? It's a little bit different than you normally see on a Flying V. Alright, I can explain this all in 4 words. Guitar of the month. As we learned last week when we talked about the SG3, after the Guitar of the Week series in 2007, Gibson followed that up with something called Guitar of the Month. Now personally, I think they kind of halfway did Guitar of the Month because a lot of them were just doubles, they just did them in a different color. But they created a new guitar every month, limited to 1,000 in production. This was the second one of the series made in March, because technically it ran until January of 2009. But 2008 happened to be the 50th anniversary of the original Carina-style Flying V, as well as the Explorer, so there's also an Explorer version that looks very similar to this. And if you feel like completing a set, they also made Les Pauls in this finish in 2009. But speaking of this goofy logo, what is it? Is it just some Art Deco thing that they decided to create? No, this is actually a Ted McCarty design. You know, one of the famed presidents of Gibson back in the day. This was in like his design book. It was something that I don't believe was ever used, but they had recently discovered it around the time that these things were made. So in order to honor him, they decided to put him on these guitars. I don't think I would call it ugly, but it's definitely interesting. So spec-wise on these guys, you have a rather weak maple top on them, but there's a little bit of flame on this one. They graded it as AA for these. But what they were really trying to do was bring out the Brimstone burst here. It's kind of like a red and black. It's almost kind of similar to a new Slash model that's coming out. But it is a 50s style Flying V, meaning it has these kind of more chunkier heels right here. It's a little bit wider in the way it feels, but these aren't Carina like the original Carina ones. They still have the mahogany body. And on top of that, they gave it these contours. And what's really nice about having this right here is it kind of reminds me of the Flying V2, the Scary V, where you have this contour right here. It reminds me of like playing an Explorer for some reason. I mean, it's pretty comfortable to play in that aspect. This particular one, it's a little bit neck heavy, especially once it starts going. After this point, it just wants to fall. But to kind of help illustrate some of the other differences that this guitar has, let's go ahead and compare it to like a 67 style Flying V so you can see it side by side. Headstock to headstock, the most noticeable thing is the binding and the Art Deco Gibson logo with that red mother of pearl inlay. And the truss rod covers are different as well. The 50th anniversary has one that's more similar to a Les Paul, whereas you have the 3-screw with the Gibson logo on the 67 style. The tuners are also different, but not a huge comparison here because of something I'll tell you later. But Super 400 inlays versus the dot inlays, ebony fretboard versus rosewood. On top of that, you even have gold frets on this 50th anniversary model. Next up are the pickups. They're both uncovered in this model, but stock it would have had gold covers on them. But notice, there's no pickguard on this one. That's what makes it completely different from a 67 or a 58 style Flying V. And also, once again, notice the body contours, not something that a Flying V usually has. Backside of the headstock, nothing too different here besides the binding along the fretboard. You only normally see that on like a Flying V Custom. Then most Flying Vs are top routed, whereas this one is back routed, since obviously, again, doesn't have the pickguard. And the other big thing for this one is it came stock with Steinberger gearless tuners. Now, you used to be able to take those off of your guitar and sell them on eBay for like $350 because Gibson bought the Steinberger brand back in the 80s and they pretty much did nothing with it. But upon the revival of new Gibson now, you can actually finally buy those themselves separately for cheap. I mean, look on their website, anywhere between $99 to $129 gets you a set depending on if you want black, chrome, or gold. This particular one, if you haven't noticed yet, it's been highly modified. But let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench and we'll talk a little bit more about those. Taking a look on the inside of this one, the pickups have been swapped out on this guitar. According to Gibson, it originally had 57 classics with a plus in the bridge. But currently we're rocking a Seymour Duncan 59 in the neck, and then in the bridge position we have a DiMarzio Tone Zone. Now, I remember that one, Tone Zone. It was in the Ibanez that I had, and I really liked that pickup. So I'm kind of interested to hear how that'll sound in this setup. This has got to be one of the sloppiest neck pickup cavities I've ever seen from Gibson, though. I mean, look at that. From the end of the neck tenon, there's just like a bunch of dull router bits all bunched up right here, and then they just got painted over. It does the job, I guess, right? And the bridge pickup cavity reads DSVSD. The bridge on this model is a traditional Nashville style. It just says PW on it. And the tailpiece is a standard full weight version. This thing was definitely heavily played. There's just like some haziness to the finish right here. I polished it up the best I could, but you can also see very fine finish checking running up and down this guitar. So what that tells me is this was probably in a high humidity area for a while. I mean, the neck's good and everything on it, but there's definitely some other things we'll have to talk about. The knobs have been replaced definitely, and potentially even the whole three-way toggle switch system, because that's not gold and that's not normally the style you would see on a Gibson. Also, originally the three-way toggle switch was down here, so somebody's kind of swapped the electronics around to suit their preferences. Personally, I think having that toggle switch a little bit closer is a little bit more useful, to me anyways, because even having your volume up here there, it's not quite volume swellable, but close enough. Your output jack there. And once again, the contouring to the body right here. Spec-wise, it's a maple top on top of a mahogany body with a mahogany neck. And here's what's kind of cool with this guy. The ebony fretboard with the Super 400 inlays that go all the way up the neck. That's not traditional. Usually these stop after 17th fret, so that's kind of more like a Les Paul Supreme thing going on. And if you take a really close look at these frets, they're actually gold in color. Now, if you do the steel wool treatment that I usually do, you almost seem to erase the goldenness of it, but then it comes back after a little bit. Personally, I think gold frets, it sounds really cool, doesn't it? But it just makes your frets look rusty regardless of what you do to clean them. So it's awesome in theory, but not necessarily in practice. This instrument also suffers from that oh-so-common late 90s to mid-2000s issue where the fretboard binding actually separates a little bit from the fret and causes a gap. Now, depending on your playing style, your string can get caught in that and it's really annoying. Personally, I don't run into too many issues with it, but I could see how it definitely affects some people. So I'm always looking for that so I can disclose it. The only way to fix that is pretty much to sand off your nibs and then level off your fret. I'm pretty sure you could do that. A lot of luthiers will try to talk you into just doing a complete refret though. The truss rod cover is brass. It reads 50th for 50th anniversary. And once you take that away, you get your fancy Gibson logo and this kind of red inlaid mother of pearl thing. I used to think that was just kind of like a red finish on top of the headstock. No, it almost kind of has a modern flying V thing going on. Once again, notice the multiply binding on the headstock and the tuners have been swapped out on this one. I get a 1.7 inch nut width, which increases to 2.11 at the 12th, so it's a rather wide feeling neck. Then our first fret here is 0.84 and increases to 0.89 by the 12th. So kind of a wide, thin feeling neck here, but it still sports that 24 3/4 inch scale. And here's what the backside of the V looks like. Now, unfortunately, when somebody did those modifications, they lost the original backplate. Yeah, I made this really crappy looking one. It's better than nothing. I kind of held off on this review, hoping maybe I could find another one so I could send the backplate in to get it duplicated, but nope. No luck. Let's just get this one out there. But it looks like you do have two original Gibson branded pots and your three-way toggle switches here. And then your output jack has its own little special container, similar to what you would normally see for a three-way toggle. Now this thing has seen heavy wear. I mean, these aren't like smudges or anything. These are actually nicks and dings within the finish. You can see this must have got dinged up. There's I wouldn't say it's cracking, but it's like a finish impression mark around there. Probably from over tightening or something like that. And the other location is right here and you can see all that finish checking. But thankfully, no breaks, cracks, or repairs that you really have to worry about. And the back might look black, but here's a nice, good look at the Brimstone burst finish. How it's actually kind of like a really dark maroon color, kind of similar to what Oxblood does. How it looks black from certain angles, but red at others. The only other thing to talk about right here is there's another ding. I mean, that's a pretty aggressive looking ding, but it's not actually a break. And these were numbered 1 through 1,000. This is number 687. You've got your traditional serial number right there, as well as a Made in USA stamp and the year. And of course, these tuners. I think they're a really cool replacement for this guitar. I love the look of waffle backs. All put back together, it weighs 6 pounds, 15.4 ounces. So pretty much 7 pounds right there. Now, before we get into the tones of the instrument, I want to talk a little bit more about that binding gap. This one is so extreme that it's almost slightly useful in a strange way. So typically what'll happen is your note will just get caught if you happen to get it in that gap, and then you just get a buzzed out note. But this one's so extreme around like the 5th, 7th, and 9th fret that you could actually use it as a new technique to bend your note up a whole step really quickly. So you could make like a little jazzy thing out of that. Sure, you could do the same lick doing this. I just think it sounds cooler and cleaner bending it off the fretboard like that. Now you can do that with your other guitars, but since there's not a little ledge that keeps it in place, sometimes it can be hard to get that consecutively. You know, the other time I found that useful was with distortion. So that's something quirky about this one. Let's go ahead and hear the neck pickup. So what are my final thoughts on the Brimstone Burst Flying V? You know, I've never really been super attracted to this design. I mean, I like how quirky it is with the Super 400 inlays and the fancy looking headstock here, but I was surprised just how much I like this. Sometimes you get a fully blinged out guitar and you're a little bit scared to play it. Maybe it's just because this one's all been modified and it's all scratched up, dinged up anyway, so I don't have to be scared of ruining it any further. I really enjoyed playing this one, despite not necessarily loving the neck profile at first. So yeah, I would probably get another one of these in the future, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite Flying V. I think that still goes to the mid-70s Flying V styles. So now that we know all about this guitar, let's go ahead and go over its condition if you're interested in owning this one. If you've ever wanted to own one of these, but you didn't want to pay the $2,500 prices that people ask, this is probably going to be the cheapest one of these you'll ever find. But it's got a lot of cosmetic imperfections, as we've kind of seen before, but it still plays and sounds great. So don't be too scared of this one. All right, so face of the headstock, you've got scratches pretty much all over it, and I want you to notice along the tuners. Remember, this had those Steinbergers originally, so that means it's possible some extra routing might have had to been done to open up the holes a little bit for these Kluson styles. On top of that, you have some finish wear along each of these holes. I mean, it's not super apparent, but it's definitely there when you're looking for it. Also, along the edges of the headstock from where the binding ends and the headstock truly begins, you can see that finish cracking line. It's very apparent right here, and you've got kind of a large ding into the binding in this area. I mean, this thing is definitely heavily worn. You have that whole finish crack line pretty much all along this guitar, especially along the edges of the fretboard. As I was saying earlier, I think this was somebody's gigging guitar, and they gigged it in a high humidity area, so that's kind of why the fretboard would start to expand a little bit. So you can definitely feel a very slight ridge between the fretboard and the neck, as well as the typical whole binding thing, and like what we were talking about earlier, the fret gap thing here. Now that might sound really bad for me to say that has all that stuff, but honestly, does it affect play at all? No, not really. So frets are in good shape, an 80-20 mix or something like that. They show very light fret wear, but nothing that you're going to have to worry about. You might want to get this one professionally set up to your own personal taste, but I thought it played fine. Now the body has got lots of nicks and dings. Keep a sharp eye out here because there's just so many of them, it's kind of hard to point them out individually. But you've kind of got one right here by the bridge and tailpiece. And then as you go along here, again, the knobs have been replaced. The whole control layout has been modified, swapping these two around. I don't know why they did that way anyways, because the original Carina Flying V's got their three-way toggle right there. And for whatever reason, this knob, it's just the knob. It sits crooked. I tried to fix it, but it just wants to sit crooked. So it looks a little bit goofy when you spin it, but it's on there. It's not going to fall off. You've got a lot of hazing to the finish over here if you're not seeing that. I think Brimstone Burst is beautiful, but oh my goodness. It shows fingerprints just as bad as black. Moving on to the back of the headstock, you can see your serial number there and everything, as well as the limited edition stamp. I personally really like the waffle backs on this one. I think that just should have came stock. They look great. And again, you've got this giant ding. It's not a crack. It just dinged up against something. It's a pretty sizable impression. And again, the neck is very thin and wide feeling, so I would say it'd be good for shreddery type stuff. You have your typical line around the heel joint. Nothing structural or anything. And as we were talking about earlier, this strap button must have took a hit or something at some point in time. It's kind of cracked the finish a little bit. It's probably impressed the wood a bit, but I don't see any like actual splitting cracks or anything. And on the back here is when you can start to see that vertical finish checking even more. It's also on the front, but it's so hard to see. But lots of nicks and dings and gouges on the back of this thing. You don't have to be scared to take this one out. You got my custom back plate on here. Yeah, it's better than nothing. And the edges, it's pretty much the same as everywhere else on the guitar. You've got some scuffs right here. I mean, it's player's grade. Don't expect anything too much out of this one. It's not a collector's grade one. But seeing as I'm not willing to pay the collector's grade prices for these, I think this worked out for us. It would have been nice if we had the original pickups, but unfortunately, I was unable to. And here we go under blacklight. You can see all the sweat absorptions. That's right where your arm rests. And let me tell you, that's super comfortable. But yeah, super sweaty guy that played this one. You can tell it's been loved. And that's probably why it was modified too. Judging how much this guy sweat, he probably swapped these knobs for the knurled ones because you can easier get the grip on it. Everything's good there. Running up the neck to the face of the headstock. Despite being gigged a lot, at least the headstock wasn't snapped off or anything like that. Back of the neck is looking good here. Looks like a small ding, and the neck does glow a little bit more. You can tell he's a lead player because it glows a lot more up here. And everything's looking the way I would expect to see it here as well. Now I was happy that I was able to clean off the residue from that duct tape, but you can see it did react with the finish underneath black light, but you can't see it in regular lighting situations, so that's good. And we'll take a quick look around the edges. Looks like everything's good to me. This Flying V comes in a non-original SKB hardshell case. Now these originally did kind of have a slightly special case. It just said Guitar of the Month, I think, on the outside. And the inside was a white material. I think it had a shroud. Maybe it's the shroud that said Guitar of the Month. I'll throw a picture up on the screen here. But I really like these TSA latch cases that SKB makes, so as far as a gigging instrument case, I can see why they upgraded it to this. The outside, it's got some scuffs. I mean, it's a road case. What do you really expect? But I like these handles. I doubt that would ever just randomly fall off on you. The interior is black, but I hate to say the fit of this case is atrocious. You've got one, I guess that kind of counts as a second neck rest. Original silica packet, and there is a compartment in there. But here, let me show you the poor fit. So if you got to push it all the way down, the side to side, got some room to be desired for. But up and down, whee! This is a terrible fit. But I'll give you some extra bubble wrap that you can choose to leave in here, and you should be good to go there. And even if you prop it all the way up there, you still got plenty of room in this case. That's the problem with SKB is, you know, they make these to fit probably like the Dean style Flying V's and a bunch of other ones, so it's not just for the Gibsons. If you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this 50th anniversary Flying V in Brimstone burst, feel free to check out that link in the description that will take you to the Reverb for Sale page. Thank you, Troglodytes, for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.